All right, guys. Got a stack of comic books over here. Trades, more likely, hardbacks, things like that. And I found them off of eBay. Now, thanks to doing the Cavern of Chaos show, I've had some comics mentioned by the cast of that amazing show you need to check out on mostly Fridays and stuff. Lots of backlog. And also check out Jared Osborne's channel to get some extra shows there when I'm not available and everything. But I picked up a few books that were recommended on there. Now I shot a proper video, kind of like talking about a few things and maybe showing off these books. But YouTube for some reason told me that it's going to take something like 6 hours to upload a 20-minute video. And I'm like, I'm just not down with that. So let's get this done in one and done. One and done. Just get it out there and get it over with, right? Um, and I might talk about a few things. I've sort of been reminiscing. Anybody that noticed the Cavern of Chaos was on Jared Osborne's show, definitely sub his channel to get the extra shows that end up going on when I'm not available there on this channel. I had a bit of I had a death in the family. So as I were doing a lot of hustling and running around for that and checking up on things, I figured I would take a minute while the house is peaceful to just kind of get this out there and show off these books and talk about a few things on my mind. Now, I started out trying to find this character that blew my mind, that was like highly talked about by people on the Cavern of Chaos show, highly spoken about by people in the comment section, and then people who know comic books that I chat with in other places online and in real life and stuff. And it was like, how am I the only person, it feels like, for as long as I have been in comics, that has never jumped on this? I remember seeing this character's stuff in dollar boxes over the years. I think I remember seeing it being a part of Dark Horse. Hey. Oh, cool. All right. Mind the Comics is here, and appreciate the kind words there. And yesterday's show was good. I want to catch it on the repeat here sometime. Probably played it in the background tomorrow while I do a few things around the house on Jared's show. But it was blowing my mind how it was like I was the only person, it felt like, that had never experienced what is Mr. X. So I ended up doing like a little research on this character. Turns out that this book by Dean Motter, Motter, apparently has influenced Dark City, the movie from the 90s with Kiefer Sutherland, which I highly recommend. It's influenced Tim Burton's Batman back in the day, and it's still going in little miniseries or volumes or things. Apparently there's not a whole lot of them printed, but it's been highly influential. So I started out trying to just find something of Mr. X, to where it wasn't that much. Just kind of check it out, just put my fingers in it and stuff. And I think I found 2 issues over here. There's probably some, I can't remember if I showed off some of these books or not. But anyway, this came off eBay. This is what started this little haul, because when I found the person selling this, I took screenshots of the final sales. So I'm not really going to get into too much how much these cost, because I could be wrong, but they totaled $10. But anyway, I found this Mr. X, and it's just amazing because apparently, from what I'm gathering, Mr. X has designed a city where the actual architecture of the city was supposed to be like paradise and psychologically affect people in their mood in a positive way. Instead, they all went crazy and they don't know it. So in this book, Condemned, this miniseries from Dark Horse, from a few years ago, they're apparently tearing down the city using gigantic robots that look like Iron Giant. To kind of give you the idea, they made it look more sinister than what it was before you knew what was going on. So I'm really digging this book. It's, and it's one of those books that pulls you. It looks like it's very simple, black and white, and it's a lot of straightforward storytelling, but it's deep at the same time. It has its own little existential atmosphere, if you will, when you read this. So this is something I'm probably going to enjoy. And everybody was right. Mr. X seems to be a very good book. So considering this came out in the 80s, and granted, I was getting comic books off the spinner rack I had many times throughout the 90s until now to pick this book up, and I missed out. That's cool because now it's all laid out behind me for me to pick up and collect. Maybe 99 cents for this. I could be wrong. I'll put up the screenshots on Instagram later showing my latest haul if people want to see it. All right. Berengian is here. Nice to see you, brother. So the three books that I got, Hellblazer, really amazes me because I always seem to get the best deals on the trades. Years ago, I have them on the shelf over here. I never thought I would top what I bought, if you will, on that day. But I lived in a very small town called Independence, Virginia. It'll fit in your local Walmart's parking lot if you want to go out and look how big that is. And the library was down there. Now, thing about my YouTube channels, I found out a lot of people locally where I lived were watching it. I was working in a school at a time. I was contracted out. I wasn't part of the school system, but I was contracted out as a therapeutic day counselor for troubled kids. And I would have this one kid in particular who would just kind of stare at me in the hallways and stuff. And I didn't really think anything about it. And that's when I started finding out that people were watching my videos locally. So I go down to the local library to get some movies. The town is so small. I think it had like one red box, and people would drive for miles around to use it. So I'd go to the library and check out movies for free. VHS and DVD. I've had the same VHS player for over 20 years, and I had the one before that for 10 years. I've owned 3 VHS players in my VCRs. VHS player, 3 VCRs my entire life, but they're still kicking. And then I walked up, and the lady who worked there said, "Aren't you the guy that talks about comic books?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." She's like, "Well, we're having a book sale out there. You might want to go look at it." So I went out there, and they had 3 volumes, the first 3 volumes of Hellblazer for 50 cents. They were selling them as normal used books, but these were new. They never put them on the shelf. Well, I topped that. I never thought I would top getting 3 trades for 50 cents brand new, but I did it because these were 49 cents. Okay. So my collection of Hellblazer over the last couple of years, I think I just need something like 75 issues to have a complete set, somewhere in that range. But I kind of stopped because when I finally got in there and really started reading the Hellblazer, I sort of noticed that creative teams would come and go, and the quality of stories, if you will, kind of waned enough to where it didn't really, in my mind, get me excited. I got a few stinkers in there, but these were fantastic. Some Brian Azzarello stuff, Good Intentions. This is where he's in I'm assuming I tried to look it up. The only mud lick I could find, dog lick, excuse me. But this is Hellblazer, John Constantine, or English gentleman, whatever, running around West Virginia, the backwoods of West Virginia, in a town called Doglick. I looked up Doglick. It's not a real place, but apparently there is a restaurant or something in Ohio, with the term Doglick. And it started out really great. I remember reading the actual issues back in the early 2000s, I think, because it was in West Virginia. I'm 8 miles from the state line of West Virginia. But I remember walking off thinking those weren't West Virginia rednecks. That's the Kentucky breed, reading it. But I went through this, and I got to tell you, it's disturbing. It can be disturbing when you figure out what is going on. What happened to John Constantine when they drugged him. They spoon feed you a few clues, and you got to put it together because it's just enough to where there's no way they could have showed it in this book. But I got to tell you, man, this is a point, John Constantine, where it was just a solid comic. And if you were a John Constantine fan, you got your John Constantine. Nothing really blow you away. Reasons to be cheerful. I got this one also. And these are story arcs from the 2000s. And then this one about where we get to see John Constantine's sister, I believe, is what's going on in this one. So I'm working my way through those again. Hey, Dave McKenzie's here. Victor Thomas is here. Great. Good to see you guys. And judging by the numbers, I've got the usual suspects watching, I would assume. Okay. So we'll take a break from that eBay haul for a minute because this is on top of the stack. But Ollie's, I talk about Ollie's outlet a lot. Go up there and get comics for cheap, huge discounts, 75% off to 90% off. And I ran across this. They had some Mike Grell Green Arrow. They had something else skipping my mind, but I saw this. This is some William Messner Loebs and Mike Deodato, Wonder Woman. And this is probably issue 90 up to 100 of Wonder Woman with an annual popped in there, maybe another story or here and there. Fantastic trade. Originally $25 that I got for $5. I left the sticker on there, right? You can tell I've got a bookmark of some paper I just grabbed, right? And I'm reading through this, but this is when Wonder Woman had the mantle taken away from her by her mother, and they had a whole new contest for a whole new Wonder Woman. And they had some feral, we'll call them feral Amazons, who had returned to the island, you know, after thousands of years running around a man's world and stuff, right? And they were given a part of the island to live on. Apparently it was the, you know, worst place on the island to be, I guess, or something. I don't know. I haven't really got through there. But this was when Wonder Woman was not Wonder Woman, and it was through story, and she regained the mantle. Now, I'm not a big fan of Mike Deodato's work. And this is also a book this is probably like around 1994, 95. And I was never really quite a fan of his work because everybody looked alike. He had his figures down to where everybody felt like they were built the same, but it's full of energy and a chaotic energy. If you look at it, it's drawn in a way that's a mess, but it brings a lot of energy to you. It's powerful. Okay. So that's just not my kind of thing. This is also around the Image era where everybody's trying to draw like Image. I don't know if that's what Deodato was doing, but the dude is still around. The guy still has a huge following. So, you know, if you're a Deodato fan, bam, there you go. And William Messner Loebs was all over the place in the early 90s, man. You know, Max, Flash, before Wade came on, and then Wonder Woman. So it was really cool to find this, you know, because I never really read the entire story arc. You know, I mean, it was there. It was one of those hot books in the early 90s, 94, you know. And also, I think a lot of that was going on when I was doing basic training back in the military. What we got here? Jonah Gillo. Counselor her. Nice. Great finds in the discard bins. Thanks, man. These are off eBay and that one book off of Ollie's. Hey, you're only 10 hours as the crow flies from me. Yeah. So another book that was recommended through the Cavern of Chaos show, talking with Jared and Paolo and Scott and all of them. But this was a big Jared Osborne book, I think. But Rex Mundy. Now, Rex Mundy apparently is just the historical research. The person that does this book, Arvid Nelson, did is just amazing. And it's a little bit of a hook on actual history. This one takes, I mean, it's religion. It's taken place in 1933 France. There's a there's a quest for the Holy Grail, but this is volume 4. So I got about 5 or 6 pages in it, and I set it down because I need the other 3 coming in the middle of the story, even though there's a recap. This is for the political intriguing, a little bit of the, if you want to get into something, see that apparently it's not quite, I think there was something in history that happened that changed the course of history. In 1930s France, still in the grip of the medieval church, people are looking for the Holy Grail or something. I don't know. I'm not doing a very good job on it, but man, it has accolades of Entertainment Weekly and all kinds of Wizard magazine. Everybody talking about how great this book is. So like I said, I read 5 or 6 issues of this. This is not what I expected, but it's for your historical fans, if you will, of actual history and what happens when one little thing changes history, with what's going on. Friar Tuck, you're close to North Carolina as well. It looks like that if you're still living in Independence. I'm not living in Independence. I haven't lived there in 6 years, but yeah, close enough, man. It's the internet. I don't want to give out where I really live now, So another thing that I got, this is a hardback. I don't know if you'll recognize this symbol, but Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. I'm a huge Vampire Hunter D fan, right? I'm not a huge anime nut, but by gosh, when an anime grabs me, it grabs me. You know what I mean? I like things like Bakshi, Lord of the Rings, Heavy 1981's Heavy Metal movie, Gandahar, that came out in America around 86 or 87, even though it's a French cartoon. Fantastic Planet. And then you get into the anime stuff there where it's like something, oh my God, what was his name? Space Agent Cobra, something like that. Vampire Hunter D, Nausicaa, a lot of Studio Ghibli, not all of them, just a lot of them, some more than others, but Nausicaa. You need to check out Nausicaa. But anyway, but this is a book. It was supposed to be like an art book, and it still is an art book, but it takes a lot of frames. I got distracted. I was about to run over there and get my VHS tapes of the 2 Vampire Hunter D movies. But Vampire Hunter D is fantastic, set in the future. Vampire Hunter, and I want to give the big twist about his character, but this is a lot of stills from the movies. And I think there is some original art in here, what they have, but this is just something kind of cool. You turn off your brain, you flip through, and maybe put in the movie. So that was kind of cool. I was surprised how little it was. And again, for you guys popping in, all these books were $10. Okay. Now, the last book I really have to show off here that I bought with this is, and this is probably 99 cents, but this is Superman Exile. Okay. This is a traded edition of Adventures of Superman, Action Comics. Seems like there was something else, Superman, and an annual. But this was a fantastic time because John Byrne had come on to Superman, revamped him, did some great stories on him. I'm a fan of what he did, but he did a story where he ended up killing 3 Silver Age Kryptonian villains, General Zod and the bunch, escaped the Phantom Zone, and they destroyed this Earth. And even though he used gold kryptonite on them and took their powers away, they still were threatening to come to his Earth, and they will find a way to destroy it also. I mean, they actually got to 3 points of Earth and then flew with their indestructible bodies and went all the way to the core of the Earth and just destroyed the Earth with all the insides of Earth spilling out. So what does he do? He gets the green kryptonite and he executes them. And I actually have the cover. I actually have the Superman issue that John Byrne did, signed by him, where Superman was wearing the executioner's cloak and killed them. Well, it really messed with Superman's head. John Byrne leaves the book, goes back to Marvel, starts doing things like West Coast Avengers, She-Hulk, Submariner, Starbrand. Kind of started dabbling in those before, well, at least with Starbrand, before he actually left. DC still had some books coming out by him. But anyway, when he left, he had like an outline of what happens to Superman in future issues based on what he did. And they finally got to the point where Superman left Earth. Now, this started out a little bit of a slow start, and then it just got better and better. He started finding a Kryptonian artifact. He gets stuck on Mogo's battle world, where he grows a beard and becomes a gladiator out in space. Some good stuff in here. There is some good stuff out here. Just remember, this is the late 80s. Tom Grummett, Kurt Swan, Roger Stern, just some really good stuff. And this leads up to the action issue where George Perez took over, which was a really big deal when it happened, at least for Superman fans. Yeah, so real good stuff, man. Real good stuff. I think there was a solid 3 years for Superman there, in my opinion. Okay, so let's see who's out here. Hey, big spender. That's what I do, man. Super Doomsday. Yep, Superman 22. It's right here on the shelf somewhere. I kind of want to grab it. Where are you? Did I put it up? Well, I'll tell you what. I will show it in a future video because it's somewhere in that mess. In a frame, by the way, with a certificate of authenticity. So, and I found it at a flea market, believe it or not. That's what was so funny. If it didn't have the certificate of authenticity, I never would have bought it. Just apologize, having some camera issues. Maybe my whole floor is. There we go. All right, so for everybody that's popping in there, man, I was showing off these books and stuff. Before I go on with some of my thoughts, I am going to say that on a whim, I ran across this in my shelves. Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And I have the actual issues I bought off the rack back in the day and a couple of extras. Whenever I find the 2 issues of Superman, in Action Comics that make up this last Superman story before John Byrne took over. It was, of course, written by Alan Moore, Kurt Swan, George Perez doing inks on one issue, and Kurt Schaffenberger doing another one. The story actually holds up for something that came out in, what was it, 85, 86, probably 86 is when this came out, those two issues. But it was the last Superman story proper. What if these were the last two issues of Superman before John Byrne took over? And Alan Moore pretty much threatened Paul Kupperberg, saying, I have to do those issues, threatening him over dinner. And they were originally trying to get Jerry Siegel, one of the co-creators of Superman, to come in and do the last issue, but for some legal technicality, he couldn't do it. A classic story, a classic story that holds up, and it was a breeze reading through this. It was just fantastic. You talk about a swan song for Superman. The only time I've ever actually seen it referenced was in a Superman Batman issue. If you remember those, when Jeff Loeb was writing the book, I think it was early 2000s. They titled the book Superman Batman, and on the cover was, for a title, they had like the bat symbol with the Superman symbol embedded in it. They wouldn't call it World's Finest, but we know it's what it was. But he had a story that took place in about 6 issues where I think they were both going through time and alternate Earth or alternate timelines. They had Commandy stuck in there, Legion of Supervillains popped up and stuff, but it ended with a nod and a wink to Alan Moore's ending to this. They started out with a Kingdom Come kind of Superman, but they ended with what Alan Moore ended that book with. Sounds very vague, but if you get that book and you find that run of Jeff Loeb Superman Batman books and get to the end, you're just sort of like, oh, that hell nice. Red Vitamin Blue, a themed Howlermouth show on a Saturday. You mess with my mind so much, it just occurred to me that we're on our 4th decade removed from the 80s. Think about that for a minute. That has got to be a nice segue into what I'll kind of bring. More or less, I mean, nobody else should have drew that book but Kurt Swan. Okay. But talking about our 4th decade being away from the 80s, it really blows my mind, because that means the way my mind thinks sometimes is it's all because of the Monkees. In the 80s, there was a renaissance, maybe around 86, maybe the end of 85. We didn't get cable until 1985, where I lived. And that's when we got MTV proper. But MTV started showing the Monkees. And my mom was all excited because she watched the Monkees when she was a girl, right? Man, I was thinking back on that, man, and that's like 18 years. But when you watch the Monkees compared to be set in the 80s, it felt like a lifetime apart, 19 years maybe. And so when we would learn about World War II and hear about all this history in the 80s, it's like us talking about the 80s now here in 2021. There's no difference. That's how far we've come. And I don't know if it's the internet or if it's technology making us able to hold on to memories a little bit better, or what the deal is. But it really amazes me how in the last 25 years, a lot of things have not changed, if you will, besides some bad haircuts. You know what I mean? So that just kind of tells you when you compare the cultural change of the 40s, even the 50s and the 60s, where we were at in the 80s, and then compare where we were at in the 80s with where we're at now, it amazes me, right? But one of the things that really kind of, oh, cool. Yeah, now, Sequential Geek, man, I got to give it to you. Yeah, this and the Porpoise song, man. Randy's, yeah. So, wait a minute. Since we're doing this. Yeah, here's my Monkees vinyl. Here's one without a case. And I probably got 1 or 2 more down there. So, yeah, I know my Monkees, man. It's funny that it was sitting right there with my Partridge Family stuff. Yeah, so like I said, Paolo's here. What's up, brother? What's going on, man? All right, so anybody that's popping in now, man, I just had a huge pop in viewers here, man. You can back up here and look at the eBay haul that I got. Something like $106, $108 worth of trades and books for $10. But one thing I was going to talk about was some memories here going back. Now, like I said at the beginning of the show, which most of y'all weren't here, I actually sat down and shot like about a 20-minute video doing a little reminiscing. one of those philosophical things. So this isn't going to have the punch of that. But when I went to upload it on YouTube, it said it was going to take like something like 6 to 8 hours to upload a 20-minute video. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on with YouTube, but I'm just not up for that. I'm not going to be home, when the thing finally downloads and everything. Yeah. Sleepy Reader. Our only significant culture change has been the internet. Yep. So speaking of the segue that I had, and then Sleepy Reader's thing about the internet, one of the things that amazes me, and we're not going to get negative here. This is just me kind of reporting the weather, the way I'm seeing it out my window and stuff. But it amazes me how I can get those books that I just showed you on eBay. It feels completely normal. I've been doing eBay since probably about 1998, selling and buying. But it just amazes me how it feels so normal for us to get on eBay and to get on these sites and get our books delivered right to our doors and to find things and to dig, compared to, we'll say, me in ninth grade, right? These are the things that I think about. And some of these things I've sort of sprinkled across my conversations like the normal, so maybe they'll all come together right here. But I think the irony is that it amazes me how we have the internet now. For any viewers out there who are old enough to remember life without the internet, without the cell phones, without bottled water, okay, it just amazes me how we have more access to comics through the internet and more access to other people who are into comic books than we did before. When, to me, we had more comics that were more accessible. There was more ways to find comics. You could go out your door, hit a grocery store, hit even in gas stations, a grocery store, just depended. You just got out there and you would find comic books in the most random places. And of course, it was usually your pharmacies and little outlet stores like Magic Mart, Kmart. Kmart would have 3-packs just for a short time, from what I remember. Usually movie themed. Anyway, but you can find comic books almost anywhere. You go out your door, swing a stick. You didn't have to go very far. But I remember, like I said, we're going to pick my senior year, and in my memory, it's almost like I write a comic book in my head with this memory. This is the only thing where I pictured this story as a comic book. Go figure. Is that not weird? But it starts out, the first panel is long across the road, and it says Wednesday. Then we have the establishing shot where it's an aerial view of my neighborhood, my subdivision, a little bridge over a creek, and then you would have Magic Mart over here, a little chiropractic office across the road, grocery store, Scotty's Pharmacy, Giovanni's Pizza, and I was on the border of the creek from the Giovanni's and the Scotty's Pharmacy, all within walking distance at this time. So on Wednesdays, I would sit there, and that's comic book day. I would jump off the bus, get my butt over there to Magic Mart and then Scotty's Pharmacy, because in my mind, you had people who didn't work during the day getting their comic books, the older guys with jobs or whatnot, or no jobs or whatever they did. And then you had the guys that were going to be getting home and then getting their parents to take them out and have to drive all the way out there to the store where I can just jump off on the bus, get my stack of comic books, run home, jump on the bed. It was pure bliss. And now with, the river of time running across me, things that I could remember like yesterday, just a few years ago. Thank goodness a lot's documented on YouTube. But my brother lived with my grandparents since he was 6 and I was about 9 or 10. And then he would come down on the weekends. And this is what's bothered me. I can't remember. Time is just taking a toll on the memories here and stuff. But I can't remember if it was every other weekend or every weekend. But he would come down on a Saturday, and he was my responsibility. Luckily, I talked to him in the late 90s, and he has good memories. You know what I mean? Like, it really surprised me. And one of the good memories that he has was me walking him to those very same 2 stores Saturday after he got to our house. And he would buy a stack of comic books. I would buy a stack of comic books. We wouldn't buy the same comics. Pile up in my room. He'd get on my beanbag in my room, play some music, more than likely Guns N' Roses or Black Sabbath. That's where I was at the time. Probably some stupid hair metal band, I'm sure, but not Motley Crue. I was not a Motley Crue fan. And we'd have music playing, and we would read books, trade off, and all that stuff, right? Good memories, right? And then time goes by, you know what I mean? And if it was on the newsstand, you might be able to buy it. I was able to get like Spider-Man 300. I was right there for the McFarlane, popping up on Hulk and Hulk and Spider-Man, all those great moments around that time. My brother, just being a few years younger than me, 4 years younger than me, I don't know if it was the youth or the era or just kismet or what it was with that guy, but he always had the ability to have his pulse on what was going to be a hot or a key book just by picking them out with whatever gained his interest. I don't think he had a formula for it. So we had Rob Liefeld's first appearance of Cable, first appearance of Deadpool before it got hot. He had all that stuff. And he's probably still has it and stuff, but he had the eye for what was going to be a key book in the future and stuff, right? So that's what always amazed me. Those are good memories that can't be taken away from me. That's what's really cool about it. So you take the idea of having to walk around town and get your books and stuff and then bring them home and set them down to the idea that we get them through eBay and the mail now, if you want to. It just amazes me that it's harder to find books in the real world, comics, compared to what it was I can just play around on eBay. And if I have patience and do the digging, I can find $108 worth of books for $10. Imagine telling yourself that as a kid. You know what I mean? When as a kid, maybe you got an allowance or something, we'll say $5 or $10, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, this He-Man figures out. I got to go to the skating rink and there's some comic books here. And, I'd kind of like to get some, maybe a hot dog or something if I go to the football game Friday night at high school and cruise around and see my friends, or unless you actually watch the football games. You get what I'm saying. You know what I mean? And then to be told I can get all that for $10. Because back then, there was nothing to pick up a comic book and kind of ruffle through there. And you'd have something like Mile High Comics would have an ad, 2-page ad. It seems like I remember some 4-page ads with their yellow pages of them having to sell or order their catalog here. Or you'd find like a little, on the advertisement page where you get your X-ray glasses, you would see like send $3.50 for in a stamped envelope for our catalog. And you'd get this catalog in, and it'd be a piece of folded up yellow cardboard paper and some Xerox pages, and you have to go through there, and this would be everything they have for sale. Or you have Lone Star Comics. You know what I'm talking about. Back of the books, man, there'd be a page of books on sale, or books that were coming. I remember when they completely messed up the advertisement for The Tick, in my opinion, because they made it sound like a Daredevil ninja book, and it was The Tick before anybody knew The Tick. I could have ordered it, So, and then years later, you would luck up finding people to talk about comics with. Maybe you had a group of friends that was cool, or maybe you met at the spinner rack. And then in early 90s, we had a comic book shop open in town. It lasted a year, but my memories of that place feels like it was there forever. It was my Cheers, we had Good Time Charlie's we would go to at Saturday nights, Friday nights, and maybe Tuesday nights, get a beer and meet some girls and stuff. But then the rest of the time was like, you popped up and stuff, you hung out at the comic book shop, which was very cool and stuff, right? And you would meet other people there and talk like we do now. And so maybe like with me, finally started to be able to go to these comic book conventions and stuff. You'd meet people who knew where they were. Again, pre-internet. You know what I mean? Like you'd see some advertisements, or maybe in the back of Wizard, it would list where all these were, but you didn't have MapQuest and stuff. And it was quite a thing to stop at a gas station and get the map of the entire state when you just needed to know about this town, things like that. You couldn't, everything like that. So you would look up and you find people that traveled and stuff, right? So now it just amazes me that I would love to be able to go back and tell myself, like, you're going to be on the internet one day and you're going to meet all kinds of people who are going to get on YouTube, something called YouTube, and they're going to be willing to sit down and listen to people talk about comics. This is comparable to people talking to their kids when they were playing Atari and Nintendo and Commodore and anything else you can think of that came out after that and stuff, different versions of it and stuff. Like, how you want to, I remember people saying you can't make a living playing video games. And now you have things like Twitch. You had people who would do walkthroughs on YouTube back in the day and stuff, right? Even YouTube has changed with what they show and what they can do when they finally got their advertisements and stuff, right? So I would just love to be able to go back and tell myself and my little brother about what YouTube is going to be. But but still the balance isn't there, because we have access to people like us sitting here on a Saturday talking about comics, looking at what somebody bought, versus the idea that it's harder to get comic books unless you just mail order them to yourself. You know what I mean? Especially with the isolation and cancellation of a ton of comic book conventions and stuff over the last year, 2020, if you will, and stuff, right? But I mean, it just amazes me if you really stop and think about that. Because what people tend to forget and what I had to learn or never thought about is that people in the last 10 years cannot fathom what it was like being a comic book collector back in the day, however you want to do it, 80s, 90s, even further back for some of you guys out there that are watching this, and try to tell them about this stuff. And when they're trying to have their moment to shine now with the way things are. Now, people are made videos for years and stuff like comic book industry is dying, it's this and that. I don't really think that's up for argument, but I think the terminology ought to be, maybe it should be, that it's definitely weaker than what it was. Just by being able to walk outside, walk through your town, walk around, and try to buy a comic book. Try it. Try it. I know some people live in cities, some people live in rural areas, maybe some people just live in small towns. But like I said, I could take a 3-hour walk around my town, and I have the video. I have a video I made back in 2016 where I went back to just probably like 80% of the places I could buy comics where I lived that were out of business and stuff, right? Even a little malt shop that hung on until the 80s. You know what I mean? So to me, it's just thinking back about what it was like growing up, having the comic books around you, and then thinking about how things are now. The trade-off is amazing. You find more people to reminisce and talk comic books about than you can actually find comic books. And the whole idea of telling a 10-year-old kid back in the day, like, one day you'll be able to have those mailed right to you and for cheaper, just blows my mind. That would have blown my mind. I couldn't even fathom. Like, that's like, that would be like watching the Jetsons and being like, I want to have my flying car, you know. All right. Let's check on comments, because that's really about, I have a few other things to say, but it's just the same theme, just a different record. What do we got here? Woo, look at that. The comments have been going and going. Okay, backing all the way up here. Thanks for hanging in there, guys. Sleep Reader, our only significant culture change has been the internet and what it has brought. You ever do the math and think where you were at when you were your parents' age? I've done that. My parents were very young, and there is actually a point in my young life where I felt like I looked around and, when you're kids, I don't know how kids do now, but I know when you're kids, your parents are your world. You kind of don't see flaws in them. The role is a parent, not as people. And at a very, very young age, I can honestly say I stopped seeing them as parents, because somewhere along the line, when I hit middle school, it almost felt like we were growing up together. It was very interesting. I had different. I had a very different upbringing and very young parents, and I had a lot more real life responsibility compared to a lot of people my age. Thus, probably why I threw myself into comics and stuff, getting to have that little bit of being a kid and stuff. So yeah, I've thought about a lot of things about where my parents were when I was their age, when they were my age at the time. However, so I got to see a lot of that when they were so young. It was fresh in my mind. Sequential Geek went exactly where I was sort of thinking. Where did the internet push us forward, and are there places that set us back? So they have a little conversation going there. What do we got here? How much cultural change since the past 25 or 30 years? It's really odd, but there are a lot of things about the last 90s that I feel like the late 90s that are exactly the same now. That's a whole other video. Before the internet, I never knew more than 2 people at a time who read comics. And the 2 I knew at 16 were not the same the 2 I knew at 10. Exactly. I can name 3 people when I was 7. I could name, and I'm talking about my friends outside of the house. I can name 2 people that I met when I was 9, and then I can name a lot of people in middle school who dabbled here and there. 1, 2, 3, probably 4 people that I can think of consistently. Curtis, maybe Darian, Robbie, and I'm sure if I thought, there's probably like 4 people I can think of who have at least collected comics since I met him when I was in 7th grade, if that makes sense. Ooh, Gore is here. Gore Vidal. Good morning, Tim, Damian, Paulo, Sequential Geek, Friar Truck, Gus, VV, and everyone else there. That's why I stopped playing arcade games, Tim. All those quarters went to Legion and American Flag. I completely forgot about all the arcade time spent back then, shooting pool mostly. But one of the cool things that we had in this town was you would have Super Mario came out and people would be playing it and trying to find out all these things. And these are common knowledge now. This is before they weren't. And I'm thinking I was probably like 12 years old, but hanging out at the mall. And it was like some Western. It was really cool. It was a big black room that all these games were in this particular arcade that was set in the mall. And you'd have some stranger walk in, right? It was like Clint Eastwood walking into the middle of one of his spaghetti westerns where he had no name. You know what I'm saying? But this guy would just walk in, and it was really odd because we would all notice him when he walked in. Feathered hair, guy looked like he was kind of still had that feather hair that was like still kind of holding on to the 70s there. Denim jacket, black T-shirt, and he had the cool man strut. He'd walk in there and he'd pop in the quarters, and it was the first time we saw somebody use warp levels and beat the game ever. So there was like maybe 4 or 5 of us hanging out in the arcade. And by the time that he was playing this game, there was like 30 people surrounding him. Same thing happened a couple years later when they got Dragon's Lair. That was an event. People were using the payphone out in the middle of the mall to get people to come over to watch this guy beat Dragon's Lair. Good times. Good times. That's when it was exciting. I don't think we had another phenomenon like that until we got Mortal Kombat. That's where people could take on each other. Imagine me having to save my money because I needed to read my car magazine on top of my comics. Gotcha. I feel you. I feel you. Oh, thank you. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Hey, I'm just going to go through the comments here, man. I'm so old. I thought the early days of VCR was too much easily available entertainment. I remember cassettes it was wild. I thought cassettes were around since the late 70s, and I'm sure they were. But something about, it wasn't the cassettes. It was when the dual cassette players came out. I remember seeing all the news, the music people from the music industry saying that this will kill sales because people will now start bootlegging all their cassettes and music. They won't go out and they're going to lose half their sales is what they were thinking. I don't know how they got that, but I remember that. Yeah. Sequential Geek. Also pre-isolation, people were buying back issues online. The comic shops were all about Funko Plops, board games, modern comics, lacking back issues. Yeah, and a lot of Warhammer. And I know 2 places that have gotten rid of the comics altogether, and they just do model kits now. Some of the young lit writers now write comics, but the owner's observation was the readers of the books were not reading or buying the comics. Gotcha. We all have comics all around the house, and my 12-year-old daughter now does all the comics reading on the Korean Webtoons app. There you go. I would have never discovered comics if I hadn't have dropped my Pokemon cards in the shop. Amazing. That's a memory. That's awesome, man. So, guys, as I said, we've had a family member pass away. I got some things to do. I just wanted to pop on here while I had a moment of being quiet and get a little normalcy here. And thanks for everybody that's popped in. Thanks for the condolences that people have sent. If you're watching, then you have, and a few people in the chat. So I appreciate you. And guys, I'm probably going to try to do a little bit more on the channel, at least topic wise or something here. So maybe some playing around. So that's coming. So thanks a lot, guys. Y'all have a good one. And thanks a lot, guys. We'll leave it at that, man. But if you're catching this on the rerun, definitely turn on the live chat button that should be below this. Read what's going on. A lot of the best stuff from the show comes from conversations on here and from people talking and stuff, man. Because let's face it, man, you sit down and read a comic, it's you and the comic. It's very one-on-one. But when it comes to everything else with the hobby, we're all in this together, man. So later on, brother, have a good one. Be excellent to each other.